All right, good morning, everybody. How we doing? It is going to be a lovely 60-degree winter day, so we'll get out and enjoy it soon, I promise. It'll be good. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tyler Hayes. I serve here at Compass as part of the service host team. And right now at Compass, we're in the middle of a series that's called You and Two. And we've been in this series now for, I think this is going on our fourth week. And Drew will be back next week, and he's going to conclude this series, so I encourage you to be here for that. But we are going to continue that series here today, this morning. And before we just jump right into it, I wanted to try to just go ahead and recap kind of what we're talking about if you're new here today, when we're talking about being you and two. And really what Drew had laid the foundation for is really trying to transport ourselves ahead 2 years in our life, and then ask the question, what does my life look like in 2 years? Getting beyond the what does my life look like tomorrow and not going too far ahead where 5-10 years down the road can be a little bit challenging, but what does my life look like in 2 years? So you and two, and thinking along those lines. And what Drew had really talked about is sometimes we think way too small, don't we? We don't really think big enough when it comes to what our life might look like 2 years down the road. And a couple of things Drew said that really stuck out. He said, sometimes we underestimate the long term and we overestimate the short term. I don't know if you remember when he said that in the first week, and if you missed that one, feel free to jump online and you can watch it. But how much truth is there to that? I know for me, the day in, the weeks, the days, sometimes I can just think I can get so much done, and I overpack my schedule. I can't get there. But when it comes to 2 years down the road, I don't dream big enough. I don't have big enough hopes and dreams for what my life will look like in 2 years down the road. And we can do a lot in 2 years. I know Drew talked about, again, at the beginning of this series, he talked about we can learn new language in 2 years. We can read the Bible in 2 years. And he went on and on with the number of things that we can actually do with our lives in 2 years. But do we actually think along those lines? And are we thinking along those lines? So that's really what this sermon series is all about. And we're going to dive right in today, and I want to take you on a little journey with a story of, my wife and I. So 7 years ago, and my wife and I both actually work in the educational field. And 7 years ago, my wife, and this was the conversation she had multiple times, but she came to me and said, I really want to be a photographer. I want to take pictures and be a photographer and get a camera and get this going. I think I can, on the side, run a little business being a photographer. And me being the supportive husband I said, that sounds great. How are we going to pay for it? Right? Practical. How in the world are we going to pay for that? And we ended up doing the Financial Peace University thing to do, and we went and got a loan at Best Buy and ended up getting my wife a camera, right? Yeah, you like that. Yeah, we've all been there. Don't judge me. We've all been there. We went and got a camera at Best Buy with a loan. And the cool part is we've been able to see my wife. It's been fun for me to watch her just grow into this incredible photographer, this professional photographer. And really for me, learning about photography has been a journey. Because before she became a photographer, and many of you may think along these lines as well, I was like, don't you just point and click, You go to a wedding, can't you get your best buddy to get their iPhone out and just take some pictures of it? You don't think about what goes into photography, and I've been able to learn about the ins and outs, the details, the setting, the lighting. I don't know if you've seen one of these really nice cameras. The amount of settings on the back of them is insane. I don't even know where to start with one of those cameras. And then you actually have to deal with people. That's a big deal, right? Then you actually have to get people in the picture. And I don't know if I can say this in church or not, but I told my wife, I said, hey, you need to give a beer to every husband that goes to a photo shoot. Then it'll go better. I promise it'll go better, But anyway, you got to deal with people. And then what I really learned was, okay, she got home from a photo shoot, and I was like, sweet, that's it. You made some money, we're done. And then little did I know, that photo shoot went on for another 4 hours at home when she was editing the photos. I was like, this is unbelievable, the amount of hard work that goes into photography and what that looks like. And then, as you probably know, photographers are never in their own photos, right? So my wife has a problem because she's never in any of our photos. It's always me and the kids, typically. So every now and again, she'll be brave enough to set up a photo shoot. and she will get the settings right, get the lighting right, put me in the spot I'm supposed to stand, say stand there, and click the button. So she'll do all but click the button for me, and I still mess up the picture. Half the time, my pictures are still out of focus and blurry, and I don't know how that happens. She basically does it for me, but they still are. And I got to thinking, when we're thinking about being you and two, and thinking 2 years down the road and dreaming big and what your life can look like in 2 years, we need a clear, focused picture, don't we? We need to know what is out there. We need to have that clear picture. And so I want to start by just asking the question. We've been in this series for, again, 3 weeks now. But do you have a clear picture? Do you have a clear picture of your family? Where's your family going to be in 2 years? Or is that picture blurry? Or maybe you don't even have a picture of what your family's going to look like in 2 years. What about your finances? We just talked about Financial Peace University. Do you have a clear picture in 2 years down the road on what your finances are going to look like? Or right now for you, is that picture kind of blurry? What about your time, the time you spend? Whether you're in high school, college, young adult, married with kids, you're retired, wherever you're at in life, is that picture of how you're going to spend your time in 2 years, is that clear for you right now, or is that picture kind of blurry? And again, maybe you don't even have a picture right now. What about your relationships? Could be a relationship that you're looking to get into. Could be relationships that you currently have, friendships, whatever it may be. Do you have a clear picture of what those relationships are going to look like in 2 years? Or are those kind of blurry as well? And if I got to be honest, I got to tell you that, maybe some of these up here are in focus for me, but a lot of them are still blurry. A lot of them are still blurry, or I don't really just have a clear picture on what it may look like in 2 years. And again, I think the important thing is we got to try to find a way to get that clear picture. Otherwise, it's hard to get where we want to go. You know the term willpower, right? We hear the term willpower a lot. Our culture loves to throw out the term willpower. And I'm going to give you a definition from an online dictionary, since we can trust everything that's online. And it says, control exerted to do something or restrain impulses. Control exerted to do something or restrain impulses. Come on, be honest. How exhausting does that definition sound? Seriously. I read that definition, I was like, this is our problem right here. We're trying to do everything with willpower. We're trying to take control of everything, and it's exhausting. When we're trying to get where we want to go, we're always putting it on ourselves. And it truly is exhausting. Think about New Year's resolutions. This matches right up with that, right? Make a list, and then do it. That's what they tell you. You just got to do it. You just got to take control and do it. And I think, honestly, that is our problem. And really, I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is, who is taking the picture? Who is the photographer? Is the photographer you? Are you trying to take your own picture of where you want to be in 2 years? Is it a friend taking that picture for you? Is it our culture? Is it the political world? Who is taking that picture for you? And that is maybe where we get into those blurry pictures. Because I think a lot of times, and here is maybe the question that you need to think about, is, are you your own photographer working on the willpower level? Is that where you're at right now? And I can probably guess that if you're exhausted, or if you're even tired about thinking about where you're going to be in 2 years, you're probably on the willpower level. You're probably trying to take your own picture of where you feel like you need to go, or you're allowing other people to take the picture of where you think you need to go, and then you're trying to do it on your own. And that's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And so maybe the better question is, and for me, some of those pictures that I thought were clear when I was thinking about this became a little bit more blurry, to be completely honest. Think about these questions now after thinking about willpower. Are you taking the picture of where you think your marriage should be in 2 years? Are you taking the picture of where you think your finances should be in 2 years? Is a friend taking a picture of where you think your relationship should be in 2 years? Are you taking a picture of where you think your time, how you should be spending your time, what that looks like in 2 years? And when you phrase it that way, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, I started to take a step back and go, well, maybe my pictures aren't as clear as I thought they might be. Maybe I am exhausted for a reason because I'm trying to do this on my own. I'm trying to get where I want to go on my own. And we go back to photography is hard work, right? The settings, the people, the editing, the constant work in that. And what I want to propose this morning is that we need to hand over the camera. We need to hand over the camera to our Creator. And what I'm not proposing is to say that this isn't going to be hard work. I think we need to give the hard work to God let Him create that picture for you. Let Him tell you what that picture looks like. And then, hand that camera over to Him, let Him edit. Let Him be a part of the process, the ongoing process of editing what that looks like. And again, the hard part I think for us is really, and this is probably harder than what we're doing with willpower right now, the hard part for us is actually releasing that control, is what I would argue. The hard part is actually giving up that control, releasing that control, and putting it in God's hands. And so this morning, the title of this sermon is actually called Attitude and Access. It's called Attitude and Access. And what we're going to talk about is how do we remove willpower and move towards attitude and access. And again, the best part about Compass is how we do that is we get right into the Bible and we learn about what God has to tell us about that. So this morning, we're going to jump right in as we look at moving away from willpower into attitude and access. And we're going to jump right into talking about what that actually looks like. How do we do that? How do we get to a place where we're not trying to do everything on our own? We're not trying to control everything as we dream big for 2 years down the road. And the best part is, Jesus, when he was on earth during his ministry, when he taught, he spoke in word pictures, right? Those are called parables. And there was parable after parable when he taught, and they're word pictures. That's really what they are. He made it as clear as he possibly could for us as here is that picture. Here's where I want you to be. And now it's up to us, right? Now it's up to us. Are we going to be hanging on to that camera, or are we going to hand it over to Him? So the first thing we're going to talk about is attitude, which is basically handing over the camera to God. And this morning we're going to dive into 2 word pictures, 2 of God's parables this morning. And the first one we're going to jump into is in Matthew chapter 7. So if you want to turn there with me in your Bible, or if you've got your phone, whatever works for you, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 7. And we're going to look at verses 24 through 27. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 27. And this is the parable or the word picture of a house on a rock. And many of you have probably heard this parable. Some of you may not. But this is the parable of the house on the rock. And while you're turning there, I want to give you just a little bit of context, a little bit of the setting, before we just jump into the parable. But this is Jesus teaching, right? And this parable actually takes place at the very tail end of the Sermon on the Mount. And many of us have probably heard of the Sermon on the Mount. This is one of Jesus' most famous sermons in the Bible, and this is the conclusion, basically, of that sermon when he gives this parable of the house on the rock. And the Sermon on the Mount goes all the way from chapter 5 through chapter 7. So if you haven't read the Sermon on the Mount, I would encourage you to do so. We're not going to have time to do that this morning, but I would encourage you to read that because Jesus is just getting done teaching a bunch of people on a way of living. That's really what he's teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. So think about that as we jump into how he's concluding this long teaching to these people about a way of living. Then he jumps right into this word picture, this parable. So let's get right into verse 24, and it'll be up on the board for you as well, the screen. It says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Verse 26, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and it fell, and great was the fall." What an incredible word picture, isn't it? Like this is such a cool word picture, and you got to remember he had just gotten done teaching the Sermon on the Mount, telling people this way of living, and then he concludes it with this. So let's summarize this a little bit, this word picture. We've got this picture he's painting of 2 houses, right? The house the foolish man built and the house the wise man built. And one of them's built on sand and one of them is founded on the rock. And I think before we jump into the difference, which is we're going to find is pretty obvious, I think we have to think about the similarities in this, in these two houses and these two people, right? What we first have to realize is they are both engaged in the process. The foolish man and the wise man were both engaged in the process of building the house. That's the obvious similarity in that. They both finished the house in this word picture. They both finished the house. And the storm came to both houses. The storms came into both houses. So think about this. These are probably two, if we think about houses just, out anywhere, these are probably, think about two of the same houses side by side, and they look identical, right? Isn't that similar to our relationships, finances, when we think about it, how similar things can look from the outside, in those things? And that's the picture he's painting. The difference comes, and what we see is in the actual foundation, something that we can't see, right? There's something that we can't see. And really the difference is exactly what we're talking about. One of these houses, the foolish man, is being built off willpower. Let's be honest, right? It's being built off willpower. This person is in control, trying to do this on their own, and yeah, they get there, they build the house, but what happens when the storms come? The house falls, the house crumbles. Doesn't this sound like our New Year's resolutions a little bit? Right? Yeah, we make our list. Yeah, we start willpowering our way, controlling our way to where we want to be with our New Year's resolutions, but then life happens, doesn't it? Something happens to our finances. Something happens to our health. Something happens to a relationship. A natural disaster actually happens, God forbid. And then it all comes crumbling down, doesn't it? Our New Year's resolutions are gone, basically. They're no longer there. Because that's because we're at the willpower level. That's because we are building them on the foundation of sand. That's exactly what this is talking about. In comparison to the wise man who built his house on the rock, this is where the attitude comes in. Removing willpower and having an attitude of obedience. And that's really what it's all about. Look at verse 24. Everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man. So again, Jesus just got done talking about this way of living in the Sermon on the Mount. And now he's saying, if you want to build your relationships, your marriage, your finances, your time on the rock, on the foundation, on Jesus, that's going to withstand all the changes that are going to happen, then you have to have an attitude of obedience. You have to be in the Word, and not just in the Word, not just hearing the Word, but doers of the Word. And that's the key. So this is a perfect picture of, hey, if you want to get where you want to go in 2 years, if you want that clear picture, right, we have to get in the Word, and we have to put away willpower and be willing to hand over that camera and have an attitude of obedience. Let God take that picture for you. It's right here. Everything that we need to know, those pictures that we need are right here in the Word. He gives them to us, and we just need to be obedient to Him. And it's funny because, again, going back to the analogy of taking pictures, again, I was talking about how hard it is to deal with the people part of that. If you try to get a 3-year-old in a picture, number one, it's hard to get them in the picture. 2, it's hard to get them to stand still or sit still in the picture. Then it's hard to get them to look at the camera. And then you can't get them to smile for 1 minute. You know what I mean? It is just a flat-out challenge. Can you imagine what God, I bet you God, and my wife would argue that I'm like a 3-year-old, I'll be honest, half the time when I take photos, I'll be completely honest about that. But can you imagine what God, God's got these pictures for us, and a lot of times I honestly think we're like a bunch of 3-year-olds. You know what I mean? We're looking in all kinds of different directions. We're not looking at the camera. We're not looking at what we should be looking at. And we're trying to control everything, control the setting, control everything about it. And that's where we get these blurry pictures. And that's where we exhaust ourselves in this. So I'm really hoping that, when we think about attitude, let's have an attitude of obedience with our finances, with our relationships, with our marriages, with all these things. And really, it requires obedience. It requires getting in the Word and being doers of the Word and releasing that control that we all have. So that's the first one. Let's get rid of willpower and have an attitude of obedience. The second one here is access. Access, which is basically allow God to edit. You know, we talked about the first part of photography is getting the picture, getting that clear picture, right? But then there's the ongoing process of editing, which is the longest, most rigorous, the hardest part of photography, as I've learned from watching my wife. And the bottom line is, the setting's gonna change, right? We're gonna take a picture. Life is gonna happen, you know? It's gonna start raining. There's gonna be moments where it gets hard. And for us, in a world, my wife actually gave me this idea, I gotta give her credit for it, but she said, how often do we try to Photoshop, right? Or Instagram or Snapchat. We can change any picture we get however we want to. So once we get that clear picture from God, are we gonna start trying to Photoshop that photo? Are we gonna start trying, when things get hard, when the setting changes, are we gonna try to start changing what that picture looks like? And I think that's where access comes in and really allowing God to edit that ongoing process of editing in our life. And this is another word picture, another parable we're gonna jump into here. So if you wanna turn with me to Luke 18, Luke chapter 18, verses, and we're just gonna look at verses 1 through 8. This is the parable of the unjust judge. Again, you may have heard of this one, maybe you haven't, but this is the parable of the unjust judge, another word picture from Jesus in his teaching. And I'm just gonna jump right into this one and start with verse 1. It says, now he was telling them a parable. He just straight up tells you. He was telling them a word picture to show them that at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart, saying, in a certain city there was a judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. And there was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him saying, give me legal protection from my opponent. Verse 4, for a while he was unwilling, but afterwards he said to himself, even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give her legal protection. Otherwise, by continually coming, she will wear me out. Amen, moms? Yes? Yep. We all get that. And the Lord said, here's what the unrighteous judge said. Now, will God bring about justice for his elect who cry out to him day and night? And will he delay long over them? I tell you that he will bring about justice for them quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Again, another really cool but kind of really interesting word picture, right, from Jesus. And he opens it up by telling us exactly what this word picture is all about, what it means. And what does he say there? In verse 1, he says this parable is to show that at all times they ought to pray. So this is really a parable about persistence in prayer. That's really what this parable is all about, this picture is all about. And here we have, and I'm not talking about, sometimes I think we get caught up in, oh, well, prayer, what's our first thought when we think about prayer? Eyes closed, knees bent, door shut. I mean, honestly, that's sometimes where our mind goes immediately when we think about prayer. And that's really just the custom of prayer. That's not what this is talking about. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's biblical. It's Jesus removed himself. I mean, it's in the Bible. But what I'm talking about, what this is talking about is persistence in prayer, being constantly in prayer. And what the definition of prayer is here is that constant flow of communication with God, which means God answers eye-open prayers. Isn't that cool? We don't have to close our eyes if you don't want to. You can have a conversation with God and be praying with God and have your eyes open. You can be on your walk. You can be in the middle of a meeting at work. You can be anywhere and have that constant flow of communication with God. And, you know, here we see this unjust judge, and what God is doing, he's not comparing himself to the unjust judge. He's actually saying, look, we have this judge that sits in a high place who is ungodly, right? He openly says that. He's ungodly. He doesn't respect man. So he has no interest for this widow, right? Zero interest for her. And there's this widow who really, let's be honest, doesn't have very many rights. And she's trying to get protection from this judge sitting on this high seat who could care less about this person. But she's persistent enough, right, that he eventually answers her cry. He eventually gets there. And what God's saying here is, if this unjust God is going to do that, how much more will a just, loving, gracious God be willing to answer our cries if we're persistent in prayer? That's really what this picture is all about. And that's the access part of this. God wants to have access. He wants to continue to edit and be a part of that picture where we want to be in 2 years. And we have to allow that access to him. We have to be sensitive to him. We have to be in constant communication and constant prayer with him. And this is not just the only place in the Bible where this theme comes out. I'm going to list a few more, and I'm not going to read the entire verse, so feel free to check me later. But 1 Thessalonians 5:17 talks about praying without ceasing. Romans 12:12 talks about being constant in prayer. Philippians 4:6 says pray in everything. Colossians 4:2 talks about being devoted in prayer. I mean, this is a constant theme in the Bible. This isn't the only place in the Bible where we see God talking about how he wants to have that constant communication, that constant access to us, and be a part of the day in and day out struggles and difficulties and the good days. Then when things are going well, he wants to be a part of that. We need to allow God to be the editor of our life and not try to take that control back and Photoshop these pictures that he's created for us. And it's a funny thing. Sometimes people will talk about how prayers, if anybody tells you prayer is easy, it's so false. Prayer is one of the most difficult things ever. Let's just be honest. It is hard. And I'll tell you why it's hard, because it's powerful. If prayer were powerless, then it would be easy. Let's just be honest, right? If prayer were powerless, it would be easy, and that's because the devil wants to see nothing. He knows how powerful it is, and he wants to do nothing more than to interrupt our daily, constant flow of communication with God. So if the devil is against it, then it's going to be difficult, right? So it's okay for us to know that prayer is a challenge. It is hard, and that's why we need to be, and that's why we need to, because it's powerful, but it's not easy. And sometimes I think y'all runaway knocks or doorbell ringing ditches. Yeah, some of you are shaking your head like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I was doing that. I think sometimes we honestly treat prayer just like that, don't we? Yep, we come and knock to God, or we've got that clear picture of where we want to be in 2 years, and we're like, okay, I need to be in that. I need to give God access, and we come and knock, and we start praying. But then we lose hope, don't we, pretty quickly? I know I do in a lot of my prayers. And we just stop praying. We stop praying about whatever that may be, and by the time God opens the door, we're already gone. We've already ran. We're already out of there. I mean, that's seriously sometimes how we treat prayer, and I'm personally just as guilty of it. I'll be praying for someone or praying for something in my life, and if it doesn't happen in a week, then, well, I'll check that off the list and start doing something else, right? I mean, that's really where we end up going. And we need to stick with these pictures God has created for us. We need to stick with them and pray over them and have that constant communication. So again, that second one, let's get rid of willpower, that control, and give God access. Give God access and let him edit and be a part of our lives. So 2 things really this morning. Let's get rid of control. Let's think about attitude and access. Think about attitude and access. And really, what are the next steps? I don't want to leave without giving you, just some next steps. What does that actually look like? The thing is, we just went through announcements, and I could just have Becca come back up here, and she could just give you this part of the sermon. But Compass has so many things happening in the next month or two. I mean, think about it. We think of the many habits Drew has talked about as we think about U&2, and just maybe what that next little step is for you. We have that marriage conference coming up. So when you talk about, hey, you want to start getting a clear picture of what your marriage is going to look like in 2 years, what better place to start than to sign up for a marriage conference and start hearing about what God's word says about marriages and start being obedient to that. Same with True North, Foundations of Faith. Maybe you don't even have a picture right now, or you don't even know what that picture may look like. There's no better place to start than that Foundations of Faith. Sign up for that class. Get to know what this being a Christian thing is all about. Or maybe the spiritual discipline. We've got that class where, hey, how do I even get in the Bible and study it? God, you're telling me God's got all these pictures for me in the Bible. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. This is a great first step. Get signed up for this class and learn all about it. We talked about financial peace. You want that clear, in-focus picture of your finances versus that blurry one? This is a great place to start. This is a really good place to start to get some godly wisdom and hear what the Bible says about your finances. And it says a lot about money in the Bible. We also have the raising kid, your family. We talked about family, that picture of your family. Another great place to start. Get into this class, learn about how you're going to raise a kid in this culture, in this day and age where smartphones and access to everything, these kids have access to absolutely everything from elementary age on. I mean, they have iPads in their classes these days, so they can get into everything. What a great place to start if you're wanting to look at what your family is going to be like in 2 years. Core groups. Many of you are signed up in core groups. A group of people really just getting together to do life on a weekly basis is what this is all about. Again, a great first step. We have a mentor program coming up. If you just need a person to walk with you, again, if we're talking about getting away from willpower, start putting some people in your life that can help you. Start surrounding yourself with some people that can get you pointed in the right direction. Drew, again, talked about reading the Bible in 2 years, and he's getting information out on that. Another great place to start is reading the Bible in 2 years. Again, these are just some really good next steps for you as you think about being you in two and moving away from taking your own pictures and letting God take those pictures of your life. And I want to conclude this sermon by just talking about one thing that I don't want to leave out. And that's the fact that each and every single picture in this room is going to be so uniquely different. So uniquely different. This is something we have to guard against, is comparing pictures, don't we? That picture looks better than mine. I want my picture to look like that. We do that all the time. Our pictures are so uniquely different, and that's the most incredible thing about God, is that our pictures are uniquely different. And I'm not even going to put the words up on the screen, and I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but please, if you want to just get a glimpse of this person you're handing your camera over to, of what this photographer is like, how much he cares about you, read Psalms 139. Just read that chapter. It's an incredible chapter. It's a song from David, and I'm just going to read you 4 verses of it. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I want you, just as I read it, just think about yourself handing that camera over to this person. Think about it, and think about what that might look like. Here's what it says. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about handing my camera over to our Creator, our God, we're handing our camera over to somebody who cares and loves about each one of us. I mean, look at fearfully and wonderfully made. He made each and every one of us so uniquely, so different, and He has plans for us. He has such a unique and incredible plan for us. We just have to align that with Him and stop trying to take that picture ourselves. So as you leave today, I really hope you think about firing the photographer. Fire yourself, please. Fire yourself, fire your friend, fire the culture, fire politics, fire the photographer, and hire the one who created you to take the picture for you, and then give him access to every part of your life. Let him dig deep into your life. Let me pray.